Hello students, today we are discussing about different approaches of personality in understanding how a personality is formed, how a personality is developed and how we try to understand one's personality, what factors or what sort of theories help us in understanding the human personality. There are different approaches in understanding human personality like psychoanalytic, humanistic, behavioristic. Today we will be focusing upon trait and type approaches to personality. If I ask you what is a trait, or the moment if I say can you describe your friend's personality, generally what do? We try to list out a certain list of adjectives like he is very friendly, he is outgoing, he is hardworking, he is sincere. So, a list continues with the number of traits or the characteristics that your friend is possessed of. According to the trait theorists, personality is nothing but it is composed of different traits or different characteristics. This trait theory or this trait approach to personality is very oldest and very popular approach in understanding the personality of an individual. There are two notable people who influenced or who developed this theory of personality. They are Cattell and Allport. Before we try to understand what are the assumptions of these trait theories, let us see what is the definition of a trait. A trait can be defined as an enduring characteristic of an individual which causes an individual to behave in a particular way. So, depending upon the situations, the personality of an individual exhibits different characteristics. One of the famous trait theorists is Gordon Allport. In 1936, he has done an extensive research on the personality traits of an individual, and he found that English dictionary alone has more than 4,000 words to describe the personality of an individual. But obviously, this is very difficult to understand or to use all these adjectives in describing one's personality or the personality of the other individual. So, after doing an extensive research on the number of people, he classified the traits into three different types. They are cardinal traits, central traits and secondary traits. Now, let us see what are these cardinal, central and secondary traits, in what way they differ from each other. Cardinal traits are those traits which dominate the individual's personality. These traits dominate the individual to such an extent that some of the individuals or some people are known by their traits. For example, we use the terms like Freudian or narcissism because of the quality involved or because of the nature involved in the personality of the individual. In following certain traits, we say like narcissistic personalities or Freudian personalities. The next type is central traits. These central traits are the general characteristics of an individual which form the basis for the personality of an individual. Though these traits are not as dominating as the cardinal traits, but still they influence the personality of an individual. And these are the traits which we use to understand one's personality or to describe one's personality in understanding the individual. For example, when we use the terms he is very intelligent, he is very sincere, he is very honest, these are the traits called as central traits. Coming to the secondary traits, these traits sometimes related to attitudes and preferences, and only in certain situations or under certain circumstances these traits are exhibited. For example, being anxious when speaking in front of a group. So, this trait of being anxious while speaking in the front of the group is very rare and only in certain situations it occurs. So, these are secondary characteristics. Allport also classified the traits into common traits and unique traits. Common traits are those which are found most often in most of the people, whereas unique traits are those which are specific to that particular individual, and these unique traits make the person distinct from the other human beings. For example, when we think of Mother Teresa or when we think of Swami Vivekananda or any other personalities, naturally they are known or they are distinct from the others because of their unique personality traits. Other than Allport, another famous theorist who developed this particular theory of personality, that is trait theory of personality, is Cattell. He reduced the number of personality traits which Allport described to 171 traits, and he tried to rate number of people on these 171 traits. Later, he used factor analytic approach, a statistical technique, in trying to bring out a group of traits which can be used in understanding the personalities of the individual. According to Cattell, 16 traits form the basis of the personality. Using this particular approach and after doing an extensive research, he developed a questionnaire called 16PF, which provides a description of the personality of an individual on 16 traits which he felt are more important, as they give a detailed description of the personality of an individual compared to 2 or 3 traits. He classified, that is, Cattell classified traits into source traits and surface traits. Source traits, it includes traits like balanced, frankness, optimism, intelligence, disciplined mind, egotism, assertiveness and stubbornness, general emotional, highly strung. These are source traits. Surface traits include trained, cultured and aesthetic, adventurous, carefree, kind, vigorous, energetic, persistent, friendly and trustful. These are surface traits. Source traits are the basic foundation of the personality of an individual, and surface traits are easily observable. These traits act as a base in trying to form one's personality. These source traits can be classified into ability traits, temperament traits and dynamic traits. Ability traits are those related to one's ability or a performance, for example, intelligence. Temperament traits are those related to the ways in which a person behaves or a person is aroused in a particular situation. Dynamic traits are most important in understanding personality, which are constitutionally called as ergs or environmentally called as meta-ergs. Apart from Cattell and Allport, another trait theorist is Eysenck, who felt personality of an individual can be classified into 3 different traits or at 3 different levels. So, one such trait is introversion or extroversion, second level is neuroticism, and the third dimension which he added later is psychoticism. Now, coming to the description of an introversion extroversion dimension, we all know that a person who is an introvert or who is rated as an introvert is more preoccupied with oneself, prefers to read, prefers to watch TV rather than interacting with the others, rather than occupying with the external environment. On the other hand, a person who is rated as extrovert prefers to be with the people around, enjoys very sociable and very active. So, we can say a person high in introversion is quiet and calm, reserved, while a person who is high in extroversion is more sociable, active and outgoing. The second dimension, neuroticism and emotional stability. This explains that neuroticism is related to the moodiness and the emotional stability or instability. People who are rated high on neuroticism are very anxious, feel very insecure and always worry about certain things and lack confidence in performing certain tasks. Whereas, people who are rated high on emotional stability, they can remain calm and cool even in the adverse situations. The last dimension which he added after few years of his research is psychoticism. So, people who are rated high on psychoticism, slightly they may be vulnerable to psychotic illness, that is disorientation of reality or unable to relate to the others, experience more of the imaginations and hallucinations, and these people may be vulnerable to become antisocial, hostile and very aggressive. They may be sometimes non-empathetic and also manipulative. So, if we use a questionnaire developed by Eysenck and try to rate the personality of an individual, people may be falling either high or on low on these dimensions of extroversion, introversion or neuroticism or psychoticism. After the extensive work done by Cattell and Allport, it was felt like some theorists were using very few traits in describing the personality of an individual, while some people are using extensive traits in describing the personality. So, either too less of the traits or too many traits are used in describing one's personality. So, they felt it is somewhat overwhelmed in understanding the personality of an individual. Later on, as a solution to this method, we can say that Norman has come up with Big Five theory, but unfortunately it was not very popular until McRae and Costa have developed their Big Five factor theory and made it popular. These people felt one's personality can be described on Big Five factors known as extroversion, agreeableness, consciousness, neuroticism and openness. Extroversion. It includes traits like adventurous, assertive, frank, sociable, talkative. On the introversion dimension, the traits include quiet, reserved, shy, unsociable. Another dimension on Big Five factor is agreeableness. It includes traits like altruistic, gentle, kind, sympathetic and warm. The other dimension is consciousness. It includes traits like competent, dutiful, orderly, responsible and thorough. The other dimension is emotional stability and neuroticism. Emotional stability includes traits like calm, relaxed, stable. Neuroticism includes traits like angry, anxious and depressed. The last factor is openness to experience. It includes traits like cultured, aesthetic, imaginative, intellectual and open. The efficiency of the trait approach has been observed by number of theorists. They felt like one's personality can be described based upon number of traits. But the question often arises, what is the number of the traits that have to be used in describing one's personality? Some people have been using number of traits and some people were using very few traits in understanding the personality. However, everyone was agreeing on the point that personality is composed of traits and personality can be understood better when we describe it in the form of traits. And this trait theory also has objectivity, unlike other theories like psychoanalysis or humanistic approach to personality, because certain assumptions given by psychoanalysis or humanistic approach could not be really experimented upon or can be provided an empirical evidence for some of the concepts postulated by these theorists. But the criticism levelled against this trait theory is, though we are assessing the person's personality and giving a score high on these traits or low on these traits, it does not mean that all these traits can be found in one person's behavior too often. Similarly, some of the traits which we have not found on any particular questionnaire does not mean that the person does not possess these traits. So, this was one criticism against the trait theory. All the traits which cannot be observed from a person's behavior, and similarly those which are present can also be not seen most often in most of the people. So far we have seen trait theory. This trait theory focuses on individual differences in the personality and how one person can be described as different from the other personalities. Now, coming to the type approach, which is also very popular in understanding the personality of an individual, there are different type theorists who have come forward with their own assumptions, and after their research they have developed their own personality theories. In traits, when we are using traits in understanding the personality of an individual, we can say that some of the traits people possess, but in different degrees. But whereas coming to the types, we cannot say that they differ in degrees. Each person may be distinct from the others in terms of their constitution, in terms of their physique, and also in terms of their temperament. Most of the type theorists surprisingly related their theories to the physical appearance of an individual, and they try to relate the temperament with the physique of the individual. One of the earliest type theorists has come from Hippocrates, the father of medicine. He said there are different humors in our body, there are especially 4 humors which play a vital role in influencing our behavior. These 4 humors are blood, phlegm, black bile and yellow bile. All the people possess these humors in different proportions. Depending upon the proportion of the humor that is existing in the body, the person's temperament will also be changing. So, he said based upon these humors which are existing in the body of an individual, we can classify people into sanguine, phlegmatic, choleric and melancholic. Hippocrates has related body fluids and the temperament of an individual. He observed that people who are having high levels of blood or sanguine type, they are more cheerful, optimistic and happy-go-lucky type. On the other hand, people who are possessing high levels of phlegm, they are phlegmatic type, as they are very dull, inactive and not really focused upon the situations. Similarly, people who are found to be high on yellow bile have yellowish complexion and very pessimistic towards the life and the situations. These people are called choleric type. The last type which was explained by Hippocrates is melancholic type. People who are high on black bile are found to be having melancholic personality type. These people are always depressed, sad and not interested in the life or the situations around. Influenced by this type approach, some other theories like Kretschmer, Sheldon, Jung also came forward with different personality types. Now, let us see what is the Kretschmer's personality theory. Kretschmer is a German psychiatrist who tried to put forward the type approach of personality. He divided the personality into 2 different types, cyclothymics and schizothymics. Cyclothymics, if you try to understand their characteristics, they have more of an extrovert characteristics, that is, they are easily excited, very outgoing, sociable and ready to enjoy the situations in which they are in. They are easily moved and capable of shifting from one situation to the other very easily. But in extreme forms of this kind of a temperament, they are known as cycloids. However, little evidence is found between this kind of a temperament and the body physique. The other type is schizothymic. If we closely observe the characteristics of schizothymics, they possess the characteristics of an introvert. They are not very easily excited, not outgoing, very calm, quiet, and they cannot easily shift from one situation to the other. They are preoccupied with their own emotions. In extreme forms, they are called schizoids. Sheldon has classified people based upon the thickness of the layers of the skin. We all know that there are 3 layers of the skin: ectoderm, endoderm and mesoderm. So, before he classified the personality into different types, he tried to measure the thickness of these 3 different layers, and depending upon the which layer of the skin is more in proportion compared to the other layers, accordingly he tried to relate to the temperament of that individual. People who possess high layer of endodermic, they were called as endodermic personalities. People who are having high layer on ectoderm, they were termed as ectodermic, and people who are having the higher layer of the mesoderm, they were rated as mesodermic. So, naturally he tried to relate the temperament to these layers of the skin. Depending upon that, he classified people into ectodermic, endodermic and mesodermic. Now, let us see what are their characteristics. Though the main research has not been found, the general observation which theorists observed influenced by the Sheldon's theory is most of the intellectuals, most of the scientists were labeled under ectodermic, because they were more involved into the cerebral activities rather than visceral or somatotonic activities. On the other hand, people who were rated as endodermic, they were termed as very lazy, dull, not interested in doing any activities, because they are preoccupied with consumption of food and drinks. Whereas, the sports person were included under the mesomorphic categories, because most often their priority is to get involved in the physical activities and other muscular activities. Though this is a general observation made by number of people who are influenced by Sheldon's theory, but unfortunately there is no strong evidence. The criticism that is levelled against this particular theory is people in all shapes and sizes cannot be categorized into one of the Sheldon somatotypes. He has just taken into consideration only 3 personalities depending upon 3 layers of the skin, but people may still fall in between those particular personality types. So, this was interesting, but there was no empirical evidence for this particular type of theory. Influenced by the theory developed by Kretschmer, Sheldon also tried to relate the body physique to the temperament. He classified people into 3 different types: endomorphic, ectomorphic and mesomorphic. How these people look in their physical appearance, we can look from a slide. Endomorphics are fat, soft and round, and their personality is they are very relaxed, sociable and fond of eating. Second category or second type is ectomorphic, who are long, thin and delicate. Their temperament is of an introvert characteristics, very intellectual, uninterested in consuming food and drink. The third type of personality according to Sheldon is mesomorphic, that is muscular and strong. They are very energetic, hearty, assertive and insensitive. He has used certain technical terms in trying to describe the temperament of these different types. Endomorphics are known as viscerotonic in temperament, and they are engaged in, most of the time they are engaged in visceral activities like eating, drinking, etc. On the other hand, ectomorphics have cerebrotonic temperament, that is, they are more interested or more involved in cerebral activities like reading, writing and any other activity related where the brain is involved very actively. The third type, mesomorphic individuals, they have somatotonic temperament and they are more given to the muscular activities. They are more interested in the sports and other physical activities. So, this is how Sheldon tried to relate the body physique and the temperament of an individual. However, Unfortunately, not much of the evidence is found between the body appearance or the physical appearance and the temperament of the individual. Though Kretschmer and Sheldon theories are popular, but was not found any empirical evidence, still they remained as very interesting theories for the students and as well as the other people who are in the field of psychology. But there are many other theorists who try to focus on this type approach of personality. Jung has focused upon classifying the people in two types, introverts and extroverts. Influenced by the Jung's theory of personality, Myers-Briggs has classified the people into 4 different types: introversion, extroversion, sensing and intuition, thinking and feeling, perception and judgmental types. So, when we conduct a research on different people, we get different dimensions on these 4 dimensions or 8 factors. Similarly, number of people have classified personalities into different types. For example, Rotter has classified people into high on external locus of control and high on internal locus of control. Similarly, Witkin has classified people as field dependent and field independent. Apart from this, health psychologists also classified people as type A and type B personalities, and the recent research included type C and type D personalities also. But this is just an overview of how type and trait approaches of personality help us in understanding the individual personalities and how they are different from the others. To conclude, in a nutshell, there are different approaches to understand the personality of an individual. Today we have focused upon trait and type approaches. Trait refers to the characteristic pattern of a behavior of an individual. Allport and Cattell have been associated with this particular theory and made this theory very popular through their assumptions and through their observations. People have personality which can be classified into 2 traits, source traits and surface traits, while Allport said personality can be classified into common traits and unique traits. Apart from that, he also classified traits into cardinal traits, central traits and secondary traits. Though these 2 are main theorists, apart from these 2, Eysenck, Norman and later Costa and McRae also have come forward with different trait approaches to personality. Trait theories helps us to understand the individual differences in personality, whereas type approaches helps us to understand into what different types people can be categorized upon. Influenced by Hippocrates, there are many other theorists who came forward to explain the type approach to personality. Among them, the most important is Kretschmer, who classified people into cyclothymics and schizothymics. Influenced by Kretschmer's theory, Sheldon also classified people into ectodermic, endodermic and mesodermic. Later on, Jung, Witkin, Rotters and other personality theories also tried to categorize people into different personality types.